Now welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that asked you what you thought of the 7th episode of The Acolyte. As usual then, I'll also be reading and responding to some of the comments left on the poll. And so let's right away get to the results, where we'll see that 2% of voters thought this was a good or excellent episode, 4% then thought it was good or at least above average, another 8% thought it was okay or maybe a bit below average, which left 21% that thought it was a terrible or not very good episode at all, and then a final 65% that said they haven't watched it and or don't plan on watching it. And so, as has been the case pretty much all season long, roughly 2/3 of people are not watching it, or 2/3 of people who follow my channel are not watching a Star Wars show. Put another way, 2/3 of people who follow a Star Wars channel aren't watching a Star Wars show. And of those who are watching it, 60% of them, when you factor out those not watching it and sort of recalculate the results, well, roughly 60% of them thought it was terrible or not good at all. And quite honestly, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said by the rather similar results we've been getting all season long for the show, at least from, I'll again point out, those who watch or follow my channel and participate in these polls. Other Star Wars channels on YouTube may get somewhat or very different results, more positive or more negative, perhaps. But this is 20,000 Star Wars fans, and the vast majority of them either have no interest in watching a Star Wars show at all, or they are watching it and think it is pretty bad. And speaking of, or kind of talking about how many people are watching the show or aren't watching the show, but the Nielsen ratings for what would be the week of the 3rd episode were just recently released, and The Acolyte, when it comes to original shows, it finds itself in 6th place. It also finds itself being absolutely demolished, almost 10-1 or more like 9-1, by Bridgerton when it comes to view time. And no, this isn't exactly a fair comparison. Bridgerton does not release week to week, and it also has many more overall episodes. But even still, no matter how you want to look at it or spin it, Bridgerton absolutely crushes The Acolyte. And even when we compare it to something that is maybe a bit more fair or comparable, something like The Boys Season 4, which does drop week to week, or a new episode comes out every week, we see it loses roughly 3-1 to that show. And yes, again, The Boys does have more episodes overall, but I do not think that accounts for, again, the roughly 3-1 disparity in watch time. I don't think having 3 previous seasons is the reason it has so much more watch time. Yes, maybe it is part of the reason, but it is not the full story. Simply put, more people are watching The Boys by a lot than are watching The Acolyte. And so I can't help but feel like that Star Wars is not the premier franchise it once was. The 2nd week or 3rd episode of a brand new Star Wars show can only muster up a 6th place finish, and is far behind other more popular shows or series or franchises of the day. And when we look at just Star Wars, or at just Star Wars shows on Disney Plus over the years now, the only show in terms of average watch time after 3 episodes that The Acolyte is doing better than, and it is actually very close, is actually Andor. That is the only show it is beating. Star Wars is, whether you like to hear it or not, it is very much on a downward trend. But anyway, for now, let's move on to some comments, but not before once again just taking a very quick moment to say thank you to everyone who votes, comments, or watches these or any of my videos. It is all greatly appreciated. Also, a huge thank you to those who support what I try to do here on both channels, that support me on Patreon. Thank you so much for that. And now on to the top comment left on the poll, which this time comes to us from Sergio Lopez, who said, "Never would I thought a pop song would be in a Star Wars project, but here we are. That's not even the worst part about the show." And yeah, when that song fired up after the episode, I just kind of shook my head, and no joke, this is literally how my brain works, for better or worse. But I couldn't help but hear Yoda saying, "That is why you fail." Because this just isn't Star Wars. This just isn't how you should end a Star Wars show, in my opinion. And yeah, you can disagree, you can feel different, you can love the song if you want. That is cool by me. But the last thing I want to hear after a Star Wars show is a modern day pop song. In other words here, what I'm saying is just let Star Wars be Star Wars. And I'm not saying one pop song ruins it or that you can't ever do something like that, but it just doesn't feel like it belongs in Star Wars. It feels like you're trying to make Star Wars something else. And there is a reason why it is arguably the biggest, most popular franchise ever. That it has endured for almost 5 decades. And that is because there is something special about Star Wars itself that does not need to be changed, that will continue to lure in more and more fans. And when you try to change it, you're just going to chase away the fans that were here all along, and likely not bring in a whole bunch of new ones if we look at what these Nielsen ratings are saying. Your attempt to change Star Wars is only making it something that not a lot of people are really watching. But anyway, let's move on now to this comment from Joseph Hutton, who said, "The whole show feels like a first draft. Did anyone read this? Did anybody ask, could this be better? Or did that really make sense? 'Cause it sure doesn't seem like it." And I think a big part of the problem with the writing is this weird desire that they have had for reasons to make this thing into a mystery when it really hasn't been very mysterious at all. They clearly have or had no clue how to write a decent mystery. Instead, they just made something that is extremely vague and thus extremely boring, and all for the sake, again, to just call it a mystery, or to maybe hide the fact they didn't really have much of a story. I mean, all this episode did, all the 7th episode did, is fill in the blanks left over from the 3rd episode, and not in a way that was shocking or revealed anything we didn't already know or didn't seem like was going to be the most obvious answer. They tried to make a big deal out of Sol saving Osha over May when, well, I thought that was pretty obvious that that was going to be the case, that Sol had to pick, and he was going to pick Osha over May for obvious reasons, because Osha wants to be a Jedi and May did not, and she was also already touched by the dark side according to him, and that then is what he has been feeling guilty about this whole time. They then have Torben kill himself in the 2nd episode, and it turns out he just wanted to go home, and then one of the witches, Mother Anastasia, messed with his mind, and he was then partly responsible for what happened at the fortress, at the massacre, you could call it. But in all reality, Sol should have, as the Jedi Knight and Torben being a Padawan, he is the one that should have stopped them from going in. He is far more responsible than Torben ever was. Not to mention, again, Torben had his mind literally messed with by one of the witches. But still, Torben kills himself, all for the sake of trying to, early on in the show, trying to think something really big and mysterious and important happened, trying to keep you on the edge of your seat, trying to keep you watching. And then when the truth gets revealed, it's like, well, he didn't really even do anything all that wrong. This episode also seems to try to make it a big deal that they are lying to the council when they obviously lied to the council or didn't tell them the whole truth. That had already been made very clear. In a previous episode, Sol talks about how he was going to tell them the truth now. And again, the truth is all just stuff we assumed happened that night anyway, with no real twist of any kind. And so your big reveal at the end of this episode is something we already knew happened for all the reasons we already suspected it happened. And that is just some really amazing writing right there. So again, this just feels like something that they decided to turn into a mystery for the sake of turning it into a mystery, or because they just didn't think the story had any real bite, which it doesn't. And so they tried to make it vague and mysterious to keep you watching and to make it feel like there was something big happening here. And as I said in my review, if this and the 3rd episode had been merged into one episode, and they had started the season with it and ditched the whole mystery thing, maybe this works better. Again, if they can find a real story to tell. Maybe you've got something here if you use this as a start to a story and build from it, instead of building your story up to this exciting reveal. Though, yes, there is still one episode to go, so perhaps something interesting may yet happen in the final one. We'll have to see in a few days. Alright, and I think I'm going to do one more comment here that comes to us from Captain Phoenix Official YouTube, who asked a bunch of questions in his comment. So I'm going to do my best to answer these questions as I read the comment. So here goes. This episode kind of annoyed me. This whole show has left me feeling like I know less than I did before. With the other episodes, I chalked it up to the next episode will handle it, but this one left me questioning the plot as I was watching it. Why was they were created artificially the first go-to assumption? Has this happened before? And well, once upon a time, a virgin seemed like a really, really rare thing, and that Anakin was a miraculous thing that had maybe never happened before. But turns out virginses are not maybe as rare as we thought. They are in fact so boring that Torben didn't even care about it at all. As a Jedi, he didn't care about this very important thing the other Jedi were trying to build up, which makes me wonder if he was just never cut out to be a Jedi in the first place. But the way they even handled it in the show, they sent like 4 Jedi with some metal detectors and some boxes to take some samples, and that's what they think of a virgins, that this is how you study it. You sit there for 7 weeks and take soil samples. In other words, the thing that created Anakin, or is somehow responsible for the creation of Anakin A. Virgins, is just something 4 Jedi sit on a planet and investigate for 7 weeks with metal detectors. The next question is, why is Sol borderline creepy? And, I don't know. He saw them doing some stuff in the woods and thought, well, maybe this is why I am here. Maybe all my roads have led me to this moment to find these twins or to find Osha. I don't exactly have a problem with that if it is made clear that he is just feeling the Force telling him to do this. The will of the Force has guided him here. That's what he feels like. But instead, the show makes it come off a little too creepy. Like he's just like, I gotta save these girls. I have this weird obsession with these girls. Next question, why didn't Sol lift the girls or tell them to step back instead of being weird and calling each other's names? And the simple answer to that is the plot required him to make the worst possible call in that situation so that we could have the mystery that led to this show that very few people care about or seem to be watching. Moving on, so are May and Osha clones? I don't think so. I think there was one being somehow. I don't know how Coral got pregnant in the first place. I don't know if we're going to get that answer at all. But it seems like there was one being, and because of the power of 2, the power of many, they wanted to turn the one being into 2 for reasons. Next up, what did Anastasia think was going to happen when she makes vague, threatening remarks and didn't tell the Jedi her plan? She was absorbing her kid for frick's sake. This lady sucks at de-escalation. And yeah, as soon as she saw the Jedi, she should have immediately said that, I'm letting you take Osha. Now, I get it, she's upset that they're barging in. I'm not saying she doesn't have any right to be upset at all. She does. But if she wanted everybody to live happily ever after, the first thing she should have said is, you can take Osha, just leave May alone, don't ask any questions about how they came into being, and let us live in peace, and that's it. Everybody, again, is going to live happily ever after if she just does that. Next up, this is what Torben kills himself over. And yes, this is what Torben kills himself over. Like I said, the whole point of having him do that in episode 2 is to make you think this is going to be some kind of big, epic, terrible reveal. It is to hook you. That is the only reason Torben kills himself, is to get you to episode 7. And then you're already here, you've already watched it, so oops, sorry, we gotcha. Next up, why is Torben's whole thing that he is homesick? He's not a prisoner being held there against his will. It wasn't that deep. I don't know. What I found the most humorous is that after 7 weeks of being there, they finally, when they're kind of around the campfire that night, they finally tell him what they're looking for. They tell him that we're looking for a virgins and what it is, and he still doesn't care. I mean, maybe this kid just isn't cut out to be a Jedi. If the idea of a concentration of force energy that has created life across an entire planet, if that doesn't pique your curiosity, if you're still like, man, I just want to go back to Coruscant, then maybe you're not really cut out to be a Jedi. And I'm not saying Jedi are necessarily meant to be investigators or scientists exactly, or whatever you want to call them in this scenario. But again, the Force creating life across a planet that was dead 100 years ago out of nowhere, that should really make you as a Jedi go, I want to stick around and see what this is all about. The next question, where was Kamir? How does he know about the twins? Why is he so interested in them? And for those answers, you have to watch episode 8. See, they just keep you sticking around. It's not the story itself that is intriguing, it is the mystery. That is all they have, is a mystery to try to keep you watching. Finally, what does any of this have to do with being a Sith or what it takes to be a follower of the Sith? You know, the thing this show marketed itself as. And that is a really good question, because this really hasn't been a show about the dark side at all, or about rising dark side power like it was marketed as. It's just a show that tries to tear down the Jedi, but kind of fails at it because the Jedi don't do anything really all that wrong in it. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're certainly not as wrong as the show thinks it's making them out to be. And so I think the whole dark side thing, or how they tried to initially sell it, is to get you to watch because you're excited at the prospect of a cool dark side show that shows the Sith and what they do in the shadows. But then it turns out to be just kind of this mystery, and then they're hoping you just kind of get vested in the mystery and keep watching, and that you're not going to be too upset when we get to the end and find out that the answers really aren't all that exciting. Well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode, or tell me what you thought of what I or anyone else in this video thought of the episode, assuming, of course, you watched it, which many of you aren't. But whatever the case may be, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.